Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm going to walk you through to my project, which is a digital wallet system, which I have built using Python, PostgreSQL, integrating fast API, SQLAlchemy, and bcrypt for hashing. So this project simulates a real-world wallet just digitally with features like registration and funding and transferring money, checking balances, transaction history, and many more things. I have the main PY here, which is the starting point of the app where I put together everything from this app using the fast API router. And I have the initDB in which I initialize all the databases to create them. And I have the core file in which I have the authorization and the DB database connection. I have two files for the authentication logic and initializing the database again. And then I have the routes in which I have all the functions. I have models for all my tables and the schema, which uses a Pydantic class to validate the incoming request data. I have also uploaded this project on my GitHub. It's a simple wallet backend using fast API and PostgreSQL. The features include user registration with password hashing, basic authentication for protected endpoints, then funding my account, which is depositing money in my wallet, paying another user, then checking my balance, and checking the transaction history, adding products to a global catalog, and buying using my wallet. Just how like a real wallet works. I'm doing it digitally using Fast API and Postgre. So I have these functions in which first I have the registering my user in which I will create a new account and the endpoint for it is post/register. Here authentication is not required because I am creating a user account, right? So we don't need authentication or a proof to like log in our account. So the request body must be in a JSON format, which is username and password like this, and I'll get a response. The status code 201, which is successful. I will fund a account. I will like deposit money in my login user wallet like this, and then the endpoint is post/fund. Authentication, of course, required because I'm funding my wallets. And then request body will look like this in the JSON format. And if it is a success, I will get my balance, which was 10,000, which I deposited. And similarly, I will pay another user. So for this, I have to see if the user is there or not, if I'm not paying myself, if the amount is valid, all these conditions, which I will show you in my code. And similarly, to check balance, I will get slash balance for that. If it is a success, it will show me the balance and the currency. Similarly, transaction history, what all transactions I have done, and response will be in this format. And then adding a product in a global catalog. So here authentication is required, of course, because I'm adding a product. And then I will see like I will the request body will be in the format like this JSON format, and the response will be that the product is added with the ID which product has been added, and I will list all the products which I have added, and it will be showed in this format, and then I will just simply buy a product which is in this format. I will give the product ID, and if it is successful buy, then I'll get this message. Now let us go through the code, and this is my structure. So here's my whole folder structure in which I have my main app with the code, models, routes, schemas, my main file, and initializing my database. So first I will start from core. Oh, also I have used .env environment for variables like my database's credentials in which I store my important password for the database connection to the Postgre. Here I have Postgre open. So this is and that the git ignore, which will ignore my passwords so that it will be secure. So let's start with the core logic. This file connects my fast API to the Postgre using SQLAlchemy. It loads the database URL from the .env, creates the database engine, and then sets up a session local for creating my database session and declares SQLAlchemy base. My fast API which impose depends HTTP exception for the exception handling and security HTTP basic for the basic authentication purposes and hash password here I have a function which will hash all my password because I cannot, it is using bcrypt. I cannot use normal password to store in a database. In case an attacker tries to steal our data, then they'll get the password and log into your account and hack all your data. So we need to store a hash password. So I'm storing a hash password using my bcrypt. So this is my function for creating a hash password, generating it. Then I will verify the password using this method and then get current user, which will validate the user on each protected route using the basic authentication using the HTTP basic from the FastAPI. Here I am getting a unique session for each one and I'm importing my user tables from app models. As you can see from models, I have this user table. I'm importing this, importing bcrypt and FastAPI and all the necessary things we need. I have the db.py in which I will from SQLAlchemy create an engine. Here I have created the engine in which I will load my database URL from the .env file. So I'll get the URL and then the connection will be possible. Importing the OS and .env and then I'll create a session, here session local and create the base of my table which I'm getting from my initdb. That is the main base of how the table will be created. So this is for the connection of the database. The db.py in which I will from SQLAlchemy create an engine. Here I have created the engine in which I will load my database URL from the .env file. So I'll get the URL and then the connection will be possible. Importing the OS and .env and then I'll create a session, here session local and create the base of my table which I'm getting from my initdb. That is the main base of how the table will be created. So this is for the connection of the database. Now going to the models, I have created three tables which are product, transaction and user PY. Okay, I will start from the user table in which I have the attributes ID, username of the user, password which is a hash password, and then balance and the transaction which is the relationship from my transaction table. So normal table how we create using SQL or anything similar, but I have used Postgre and Python to create this from using SQLAlchemy. I will import column integer and everything and a relationship to establish a relationship and the base for the table structure to be created, and this is my user table. Similarly, I have the transaction tables which has the ID, user ID, kind, a credit amount or a debit amount which is an integer or string we can specify in the bracket, an updated balance and the timestamp when we have done the transaction, and then I will set up a relationship, with the user table. Similarly, I have the product table, which is name products, and then I have the ID, name, price, and description. We don't have any relationships between. We have relationship between user and transaction. So this was my three tables, three table model, which will be we will use for doing our tasks, all the 8 tasks which we need to do in my auth PY. Registering a user, so for I will explain line to line. For the first line, we import essential components from the fast API, such as the API router, depends and HTTP exception for handling the exception. So depend handles the dependency injection in which we will use for the database, of course, and then HTTP exception for error handling purposes. From SQLAlchemy ORM import session, we import a session so we can interact with the database using SQLAlchemy ORM, and then from schemas user we import a user create. This means which validates the user's input when registering, specifically the username and the password which I have defined in my initdb, which is the Pydantic model I will show you afterwards. Then from app.models.user I'm basically importing my users table from our database, and then the session local and hash password I'm importing my hash password so that the password is a hash and a session to create a session and give us access to the database session. Then I will get my router ready, which we can create a new router instance to define the routes under this module. Then this whole thing is a function that provides the database session. FastAPI uses the yield function to manage the life cycle, like when the route is called, and it closes when it's done. That is, I will use the database when I need it, and I will finally close it when I don't need it. And I will use the post method because I need to register a new user. So we know that post means we need to create something. And so I will define a post route at slash register. The status code is 201 means source if the resource is created. Okay, then the function header I have def register which accepts an input which is user create that Pydantic model base and then the data session a database session injected using depends and which fetches if the username already exists in the database by querying the users table and then if the existing like if the users exist then it's okay. But if it's not existing, I will raise an HTTP exception because a username already exists. We cannot write that username again because you exist, right? You cannot be present there again. Use this for hashing my password. Hashes the plain text password before saving it. Then this new user, which creates a new user project using the username and hash password. DB add, commit, and refresh adds the new user to the DB session, commits the transaction, and refreshes the object to load new values like the IDs of the new users. And I will just return simply a return message that the user is registered successfully. Uh, After running the app, first I will authorize myself. So for let's say my name is Reservoir and I have password like that and I'm authorized. So I'm authorized using HTTP basic. That's it. Then our first function which I've just shown you, which will be register. So let's try it out. So the body is like this. I have to write in a JSON format. So let me write user one and create the password is 1234. I'll execute it. And let's see the user is registered successfully. And now let us see our database if they have registered or not. So as we can see, the ID is 5 and user has already been registered. Here ID is 5 because I have already inserted some values. I have just cleared my table to for simplicity purposes. So my ID is 5 and user 1 has been registered using a hash password and my balance is right now 0. So funding my account, which is adding money to my wallet. Similarly, I will import the route utilities and error handling from FastAPI and SQL or Alchemy or used for database interaction. And all three lines from here, we will get the currently logged in user and database session and also import modules like user table and the transaction table. Simply then I will create my API router for the logic and then post slash fun. Here I am using because it defined the fun loop, a post request because I am creating and depositing the amount. Then our function header is the fund account, which takes input as the current user logged in and a DB session. Yeah, a DB session and a current user. I will get the amount from the requested payload, which is what my JSON name which is my request, and check if the amount is positive or not. Because I cannot add a negative amount. So if the account is valid, then I will add it to my wallet's balance. And then just because I have added the amount, I will add a credit transaction in my transaction table. So it creates a transaction record for this limit. And simply then I will add this transaction in my transaction table, save the transaction, and update the user's balance in the next database. Then I will return a message which is balance of the current user balance, which will return my balance. Let's try it out and add 10,000. Try it out. I will add 10,000 rupees in my account. Okay, so it shows the 200 code, which means my request was successful, and balance is 10,000. So let me see if my balance is 10,000 or not. So as you can see, it has been updated, and my balance is now 10,000. Then let us try it again, and now I will give an invalid amount, something like minus this value. So it's an invalid amount. It shouldn't be added. So let me see. It's an invalid amount. A 400 bad request has been offered. That means the client side error, and this is not an valid amount, so it won't be added in my account. So this was my funding function. Let's move to the next one, which is paying to another user. So the similarly, I have imported all my necessary things here and the user table and the transaction. And I will define my router and I will use a post method, post slash pay here for creating a pay when my function header, which takes and the current user detail and a session. And then I will grab out my username and amount from my payload and then validate the input. If the username's name is a string or not, if the instance is amount like integer or not, like if it's a correct amount and a correct username. If it's not, I will raise an exception. And if it is, then move forward. Then the second condition is we cannot pay to ourselves, right? So I will check the username. If the username matches to myself, then I have to raise an exception, which is we cannot pay yourself. If everything's fine, I will fetch out the receiver's detail now and check if the recipient exists or not. We cannot send money where if there's no destination, right? So we need a receiver to receive the money. So I will check if the receiver exists or not, and if it doesn't exist, I will raise an exception using HTTP exception with the status code 400 and return a message recipient doesn't exist. And I will also check the amount which I am sending is valid or not. First, I checked if it is integer or not. Now I will check that if I have enough balance to give them. I cannot give more than I have already. So if I try to, then it will return a status code of 400 and the detail will be insufficient balance. And then if everything is fine, then we will proceed and by the current user balance, my balance will be subtracted and the receiver's balance will be added. And then I will add two transaction records, which is a debit from my account and a credit to my receiver's account, which will be a user ID, kind, amount, and updated balance. And finally, add all to the transaction table and then commit and then refresh and return the updated balance as a output. So let us try this also. I have this pay method. For this, I need two users, so I will make one more user. Let us say a user two for transfer assets, execute. Okay, user registered successfully. Let me see if I have this user or not. Okay, there are two users. And now I will pay to, I will give user, user two. I will send user 200 rupees. So it is a 200 code. That means the request was successful. Now let us see if user 2 has got the money or not. Let me refresh. Okay, so user 2 has got 100 rupees and my account balance has been deducted 100 rupees. So we have successfully done the transfer. But let us check all the cases again. If I send myself money, it is not possible. Let's see what happens. You cannot pay to yourself. So it's a bad request. The second one was I cannot give something invalid amount. So if I send user to an invalid amount, so it will say an invalid input. Similarly, if I want to send him money which I don't have already, so it will send an invalid input again. because I have an insufficient balance because I don't have that money. So it will send a bad request. Similarly, I have checked all the cases and we can move forward with our program. We have the statement.py. Similarly, I'm importing everything and now I will get the statement. So I will use the get to fetch the transaction history here. So it uses this function header. It has the input of depends to get the current user's detail, and then the session was created. So it uses the current user and DB session, fetches all the transaction from the current user, and it sorts it by latest first. So it sorts the transaction from the latest one. So I will return in a simple for loop I have used, and I will return it in this format, which I'll have a kind, credit or debit, and amount. It returns a list of dictionary object with the transaction details. These are the details and the output. Let us see actually how it looks, and we will know. Just the statement, and I don't have any parameters for this. I'll only see the transaction. So kind of debit and amount. And also, when I was doing all these transactions, like I was sending them and I was having depositing money, then the transaction table was being updated. So the first one was I was crediting myself 10,000. I was depositing. This one is for the deposit one, and this was for the pay. Like user 5 was me, and user 6 was user 2. So I debited 100 rupees to that bank account. So it was deducted from mine and credited. The user 2 got credited 100 rupees. So his account is now 100 rupees. And these are the timestamps for it. And here I can also see the response body in which I get the all the details. So to product one. So here we do two functions, which is adding a product in a global catalog and then list of all the products. So I will import everything, import the session, get user DB, get DB, and the product table. So I am adding a product. So creating a product, so I will use the post function. Let's an authenticated user to add a new product and then grab all my necessary details like the name, price, and description. Grabs the values from the payload actually, which we give. And like the input will be in this format. I will get the name, price, and description. And then I will validate if it is a valid input or not, and then I will save everything to my database and then return it in this format that it is done with the product ID and the product added message. And secondly, I just have the list all products, which I'll also use get slash product, which gets all the products from the DB and then fetches all the products. This function, but it's all that dot all fetches all the products and then returns in this format. So using a physical for loop, it returns all them as a list of dictionaries. Let me see. So product, I'm adding this product, execute. Product added, ID4. Let me see if the product is added or not. So yes, the wireless mouse has been added. And then I want to see all the products. Okay, let's add another product as well. Only mouse, okay. And 599. Execute. And this product was also added. Let me see. So two rows have been added. So I will now list all my products, fresh products. I will try it out and execute. So this is my 200 cities score. So these are my products, balance mouse, finite name, description and all. So this was successful product. So which I have written in this bal.py. Simply I have imported everything, used the get method of the API to get all the details, and then used as an input the user credentials and the session of the DB, which returns simply the user current balance. And in the currency INR, you can use an API link to convert it from INR to USD and all to make it more optimal. I have used a basic version. So let us check the balance. What's this? Execute, and here is it is my balance 9900 and INR. I'll check my balance. Last one is to buy a product. So let us buy a product. We will import all our necessary things. Again, API router depends and all. I will use all three tables in this one to buy a product because I need the user credentials and all, and the product if it exists or not, and the transactions I have to log the transactions. So I will use this API router, and then this my function header, which allows a logged in user to buy a product. Authentication is required for this. So this one gets a product ID, fetches my product ID. Then this validates it. If the product ID is validated or not, is if it is right or not, then this will check, fetch out the first product ID and check if the product exists or not. Like if not the product, then raise that it is an invalid product. There is no such product. Then I will check my balance as well if I have sufficient balance to afford it or not. So it makes sure the user can afford it. And if everything is right and we pass out all the conditions, then I will deduct balance from my uh, deducting the price of my from my balance. It deducts the price, and finally I will record a transaction and log it in my transaction table. So it records a debit transaction and then commit and update the user. And then I will return a message that the product is processed and returns the confirmation and the new balance. So let us just buy a product. I want to buy the product ID with a file. Let's just see. This is a mouse okay. So execute. Say product purchase 40430. You see if my balance was deducted or not. So yes, my balance is now 4301. I'll just see the transaction. So yeah, transaction is debit. I have purchased this 5,509 mouse and now my balance is like this. And I have purchased that product of the mouse. So let me once more try with an invalid product ID like 78 or something. So it will say invalid product because a bad request because this product doesn't exist. And here authentication is required as you can see. I have specified where the authentication is required or not. Only in register and in product testing all products, we don't need authentication because registering you are registering as a new user and listing all products is global. So we can see all products, but we cannot buy or add anything like that because our wallet is our private thing. So only where we can see a log, there is authentication using HTTPBasic and other places I have not. So this was my project, and to sum it all up, again, the recap of my tools and technology, I have used FastAPI for the API framework and the Postgre for the database purposes, SQLAlchemy for the object relation mapping, and bcrypt for the password hashing, Pydantic to request validation, and Ubicorn to set up the ASGI server to run the FastAPI. This was my Ubicorn. This was, and finally, this is my table, all three tables, the users table, then the transactions which we have all done, and all the products right here. And finally, I have the schema in which I have my user. This is my Pydantic model, so I don't have to validate each and every credential, the username and the password is correct or not. It validates automatically for me using this Pydantic from the base model. And then finally, this is my InitDB. For creating all the tables, I will use the base bind engine. Metadata will create all. So and print done if all the tables are created. And lastly, my main method in which I have included all my routers, the from the routes, and then all the models and everything here so that it binds up together. And then if it is all right, I will get a message in my home which was Wallet API is running. And this is my message which I have get normally. And if I use the slash docs, I will land up in a Swagger UI, which will show this in that this format. I will not have to make front end for it It will make it for me automatically, as I have suggested, using an ASGI server to run the fast API. So this is it. This was my project. For summing up it all, this was the tools and technologies, and this is my schema in a flowchart matter. If you have any doubts, please drop it in the comment.